Buenos días a todo el mundo. Episodio número, no me acuerdo, de Mentor. Creo que es número 10, si no me equivoco. De Mentor, nuestro programa de educación empresarial o de emprendimiento para emprendedores en Latinoamérica que están buscando nuevas oportunidades, que quieren entender cómo hacer crecer su negocio, cómo levantar capital, cómo contratar gente, manejar tu cultura. Todos esos temas hemos tocado durante los últimos 6-7 meses. Hoy día tenemos un invitado que ya estuvo en un mentor pasado. Su nombre es Nathan Lustig, Managing Partner and Founder de Magma Partners, un fondo de inversión que trabaja en la intersección entre Latinoamérica, Estados Unidos y China. Por lo tanto, muy interesante su visión. La última vez que hablamos con Nate, hablamos mucho de cómo levantar capital, cómo tiene que estar el founder preparado para eso. Hoy día vamos a hacer algo distinto y voy a cambiar a inglés en un minuto. Y lo que vamos a hacer es vamos a hablar de el hype, si podría llamarse de alguna manera, que se está viviendo en Latinoamérica en este momento con muchísimos fondos de Venture Capital invirtiendo y otros naciendo y muchas compañías creciendo bastante rápido. Vamos a ver cuáles son los pros y los contras de eso y cuáles son las oportunidades que ustedes como emprendedores pueden tomar a partir de eso. So, Nate, thank you again for being in Mentored. We're super happy to have you and for you to spend time with our companies. Thank you for coming.
Happy to do it.
So, I'm going to give you guys a brief context of what's happening in Latin America, and I'm sure Nate will have a lot of ground to cover on that end. So in 2018, actually, LATAM List, which is one of the endeavors of Magma, was the one that leading that content out last year. There was tons of good news in the venture capital industry, starting with Rappi raising $100 million from venture capitalists like Andreessen Horowitz, like Axel, like many of the big ones in the US. Corner Shop being acquired by Walmart for like $225 million. Nubank raising more than 100, I guess, which is a neobank from Brazil that expanded to Mexico last year. Warren Buffett and Alibaba investing in StoneCo, and Alibaba doing other investments that you will tell us more about. Didi Chong buying 99 in Brazil. And in 2019, we thought that 2018 was kind of over, but 2019 surprised us all when SoftBank decided to launch their growth fund in Latin America of $5 billion to be deployed in startups from LATAM. Huge news. So right after that, probably a month after that, the word was out about Rappi raising $1 billion primarily from SoftBank, and then Clip in Mexico raised like 100 million from SoftBank as well, and the Not Company in Chile raising $30 million, led by family office of the Jeff Bezos himself. So all of this is what we call the Latin American hype, which we will understand if it's a hype or not. So what's your take on this, Nathan? You have been in the trenches during this, the last 5 to 6 years.
I think there's a couple of things that are happening. The first is that Latin America has been the most underinvested region in the world for tech.
Yes.
So in 2014, I believe it was about $200 million got invested in the entire region. That's Mexico all the way down.
That's like 2014?
To 2014. It's basically doubled every year since then. And it hit, the official number was 1.9 billion. I think it was probably a little bit higher, probably closer to like 2.2 last year in 2018.
Yeah.
And in the first 5 months of 2019, just from the biggest deals, we're at about 1.5 billion already. So we're on track to hit 3 or maybe even 4 going forward. So Latin America's at...
So it's really doubling every year.
Yeah, it's at an inflection point where a lot of things are happening. The rest of the world is starting to understand that LatAm tech is real. There's real companies being built. Nubank, like you mentioned before, is the highest NPS scored neobank in the world. Can you imagine, like, people think Latin America, bad customer service, which is generally true, but the best, highest scoring for customer satisfaction neobank in the world is not from the UK, it's not from Europe, it's not from the US, it's from Brazil.
Wow.
And it's also, in terms of the economic model, it's has one of the strongest ones in the world as well. So there's real businesses solving real problems across Latin America right now. And the other thing that's happening is that entrepreneurs are getting better. So in 2010, when I went to Chile as Startup Chile pilot round, there were some tech entrepreneurs and some were really good, but most of the other people were just trying it for the first time. And now we're kind of in that second to third generation of people maybe have tried stuff, had a little bit of success, tried stuff and failed, and now they're taking all those lessons learned and launching new businesses across the region. So I think we have more capital coming in, better entrepreneurs, and actually real problems getting solved.
Yeah. And do you think, like, I have many questions, but do you think that that's what U.S. investors and, you know, funds that are, you know, myths or legends in the U.S. like Andreessen, like First Round, like Axel, do you think those guys are seeing that opportunity here, like that mix of things that are happening, or they're just thinking about Latin America is gonna be, and it's being a huge market and it start to be aggregating again?
I think what happened is that the first couple of big deals in Latin America in this round were almost by luck or mistake. That, for example, I have a podcast called Crossing Borders where I talk with entrepreneurs and investors across the region, and in one that is going to come out next week, I talked with Mike Packer from QED, which is probably the #1 fintech firm that's investing in LATAM. They're in all the big companies in the region. And he tells the inside story of how did they get to start investing in LATAM. And it was because the CEO and co-founder of Nubank knew somebody that knew them and pushed them and pushed them and pushed them to invest. And once they made that first investment and saw it going like this, then they started looking at other deals in Brazil. With Rappi, they went through Y Combinator, they convinced Andreessen and a few others to invest. And then because Rappi went like this, and because the founders are extremely, extremely motivated and thinking huge. I mean, they're thinking we're going to take over the entire continent, not just Colombia, and maybe not just in one vertical. They really have the biggest ambition of basically anybody that you can see in the region. That causes Y Combinator to say, wow, we have a LATAM company that's going amazing, we should take more LATAM companies. It causes, and you can see there's a boom in LATAM companies. I think there was 10 or so LATAM companies that were in the last YC class, up from, I think the first one ever was in 2013, it was just one.
Yeah.
And it causes Andreessen to look at it. And when Andreessen puts their stamp on it, or Excel puts their stamp on it like they did with Corner Shop, it gives permission to all the other, maybe not as top tier funds to start to look.
Yeah.
One of the interesting trends that's happening, which surprises people when I tell them in the US, is that top tier US funds that would normally only write, the minimum check they're going to do is 7 or 10 million, are writing $1 million checks in the region. That's a huge plus sign for what's happening. Big validation.
Yeah. Oh, that's super interesting. And the other thing is, and you are also very into that, is that there's some sort of competition on the U.S. investor side from the Chinese investor side. How is that looking like? Like they're starting to invest together, or you have LPs from both sides, so you probably know what's from China. It must be different or the same incentives.
So China and then the rest of Asia is generally later in the investment cycle. They're Series B, Series C later. A lot of acquisitions. The most active in the region from China has been Tencent, the massive conglomerate. They've invested a big, I think it was $120 million into Nubank at a $4 billion valuation. They just invested into Walla, which is a neobank in Argentina.
Yes.
They've done more deals across the region. And Didi also, with their acquisition of 99 Taxi for $1 billion, and then going after Uber and their biggest markets outside of the US, Mexico and Brazil. I think I saw a thing that said Sao Paulo was the 5th biggest market for Uber in the world. And Didi's going after them there. They're going after them in Mexico. So China is interesting because more and more late stage rounds are coming from there. Asia in itself is SoftBank's from Japan. So you have $5 billion in a fund. If you add up, I think even like 8 years of VC funding in LATAM, it's not $5 billion. So you're going all the way back and looking at it and having a huge amount of money coming in. Singapore is looking at deals, Korea is looking at deals, but generally kind of that later stage. I think it's really good for the region to have competition between more and more funds coming in, especially at the later stage. Asia has generally been faster to make bigger investments. I think because they're more likely to look at the fundamentals of the deal and don't have kind of the history of knowing about maybe the bad stuff about LATAM that maybe isn't true anymore in most of the countries. Yeah. So it's good to have competition.
I think that's probably more information than it should about the Latin American landscape in terms of industry. That's something that is exciting as well. Like what are the industries that have that future? Because I believe that in a maybe a small percentage of the investors' decisions in China and the US, they also see a region that hasn't been evolved in many industries, like the banking industry, like the insurance industry. Like what are the industries that you think that they are looking at, or what you are interested about in Latam?
So I think in Asia, the number one and number two are fintech and e-commerce. I think that overall fintech is the number one that investors are looking at because one, everyone understands money. So money is money everywhere in the world. An interest rate's an interest rate, and it makes sense. And Latin America's fintech or Latin America's finance system is some of the most screwed up in the world. To give you an example, Brazil, before new banks started, the average, not the top, the average rate for a credit card was 450% per year. That's insane. What? It's dropped 250% partly because Nubank and others have gone into the market where their first value proposition was your credit card's going to be 30 to 65% compared to 450. How do you not win with that as long as you have good customer service and build the business? So the numbers in Latin America are so much stronger for a lot of these finance businesses where you can be really profitable, you can help a lot of people, and build a business with less competition in LATAM. Another example of that is one of our portfolio companies, Omnibank, which does lending to SMEs. If you compare their potential profitability, or profitability on a deal-by-deal basis, they can sometimes be 1,000x more profitable than, say, the UK version of what they do, because there's less competition, the interest rates in the market are much higher, and they're able to provide a really good service that people are willing to pay for.
Yeah, and I guess also that's a window of opportunity, right? So it's not gonna last forever. So for the ones that are looking at this, you should start looking to these industries and the challenges that they have and start creating solutions for that, right? So going towards the audience, right? Going towards the entrepreneur that is looking at a mentor. How do they need to take this news, right? Because there's clearly kind of a hype, right? So it's if you're building a business, you probably want to be the next Rappi, but not necessarily that's something that you will want to, or like what will be the advice to those entrepreneurs that are starting in creating business? You should aim and be ambitious and trying to get the continent, or you should start small and then going big, or you should be approaching to these investment funds. What's the strategy for them?
So I think it totally depends on you. What do you want to do with your life?
Yeah.
If you want to try to build a Rappi and be extremely ambitious, and basically 10 to 20 years of your life are going to be just that and nothing more, high risk that you're going to need to raise the next round of funding every 9 to 15 months, lots of stress, huge growth, do it. It's never been a better time. If that doesn't sound like fun, or you don't think that would be a good business decision, don't do that. There's lots and lots and lots of opportunities to create extremely good businesses that use tech that maybe aren't as scalable, or maybe they're scalable but at a slower rate. Thinking about what business to start today, you shouldn't be thinking about, is this something that can raise venture capital or not? It should be more along the lines of, what do I want to do with my life? Do I want to build a business that has 5 employees and makes $1 million a year in profit, and I can live an amazing life close to the beach in Puerto Rico, or in Colombia, or wherever you're going to be? Or do I really want to go and try to create a $1 billion company? Neither is right, but you need to know the path that you're going to be on, or else you're going to be unhappy, and then whoever invests in your business is going to be unhappy if you have a mismatch between what you're trying to do.
Yeah, the investor and what you're trying to do as a founder, and that's something that we see a lot, and also there's I would say mismatch in what your company is today and what you really want to achieve. Like, you picture yourself as a Rappi, but you are a lifestyle business, and you haven't realized. That's something that we see a lot in companies that we have been working together, supporting. Right.
In the mentor sessions I did with companies the last couple of days, and even the last time in parallel, like 6 months ago, there's a big chunk of companies that have great businesses. They're profitable, they're growing 30% a year, but they're not a good fit for venture capital, because they're not going to be a 20x return for an investor in a 5 to 10 year period.
And I think that's a percentage you will see in any cohort, right? Like, a 10% of there's gonna be high growth, and then the other are gonna be.
And that's totally normal, and it's actually good.
Yeah.
Where it can go wrong is if an entrepreneur has a business that's profitable or getting close to profitable, they're at break even, and they think that they should be raising a bigger amount of money, and they're telling an investor, like, if you tell an investor, I'm raising at a $5 million valuation, what the investor hears is that you're going to sell for 50 to 100 million in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And if you back out that math, it's really hard for many businesses to do that.
Yeah.
So what my advice has been to entrepreneurs in the program, in Startup Chile, and entrepreneurs some of that are even in our portfolio, you don't need to do that. Build something really profitable, build something you like, maybe look for alternative forms of financing. Maybe you look for debt. Maybe look at indie VC in the US.
Yeah.
Maybe look at growing a little bit slower, but having something extremely profitable.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best businesses I saw in the last year was the founder was working part-time on the business. He had about $1 million in revenue, no employees, and he worked on it 10 hours a week. And he was thinking about maybe getting financing. And at the end of the day, he didn't, because he's making $1 million just working part-time. That's the best business I could ever imagine.
Yeah.
Why would you ever want to share that with somebody, right?
And I think sometimes we forget that we're in the business of businesses. We're not in the business of hype, right? So, but I think it's good that the transition between all of these venture capitals and billions that are putting Latin America, and the other side that is, I want to build a business that is tech-oriented, that is growing, but just it will be a great business in the future. So last probably a couple of minutes, Colombia is the new incumbent, right? So it's like you have Rappi founders, Nugan founder, even that they grow in Brazil, and many others, right? That are growing from Colombia. Probably 5 or 6 companies have gone through YC and then raising money from U.S. investors. What's going on in Colombia? Why is the new kid on the block creating some noise?
So I think that Brazil is still the number one by far.
Yeah.
There's gonna be 5 to 10 new unicorns in Brazil, or companies that probably already are unicorns that just aren't public yet. It's still the best market if you want to go huge.
Yeah.
People know about Mexico. It's a huge market as well. Things are going really well. But Colombia is really interesting because it has amazing entrepreneurs. It has, I think it's 1 million Colombians are in the United States. So there's been a lot of interchange between Colombia and the US, where people studied in the US, or maybe they grew up part of the time in the US and came back to Colombia. It's a really interesting mix of people. And right now there's less VC in Colombia than in other places. So you're getting the biggest unicorns in Latam are both started by Colombians.
Yes.
You have Rappi,
Yeah.
and then Nubank is one Brazilian and one Colombian.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's an interesting mix of people, a lot of ambition. It's centrally located.
Yeah.
It's, if you're sitting in Bogota, it's 5 hours to basically everywhere.
Yeah. We are 2 hours away, and we go very often. We do a lot of things with Bogota and Colombia, so I think it's a great opportunity. So we're wrapping up now. Lately, have you been reading any interesting book to share with the audience? I will definitely recommend his podcast, Crossing Borders. Best entrepreneurs in Latin America that are doing exactly crossing borders between the US, so it's very highly recommend. But any book that you're reading lately?
I think that a book that we've recommended a lot recently, especially to entrepreneurs that are maybe not exactly looking for the 100x returns, is Rework, which is it's an older book.
Yeah.
From the founders of Basecamp.
Yes.
We're super fans of them as well. I think that the classics of how to win friends and influence people as a startup founder is really important to understand, because it's how you motivate people, how you become a good leader. I think that depending on, for the right person, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink is really good. Especially for LATAM founders that are maybe going to the US, is really interesting. I think it's not a book, but a Twitter feed, which is Amir from Todoist. His Twitter feed talking about remote work and working across borders, and he's really a thought leader there. I think that's a super interesting one to look at, especially if you're going to have an office in Puerto Rico and an office in San Francisco or Colombia and New York or wherever.
That's amazing. Well, that's definitely a wrap. Thank you, Nate, for your time. Amazing advice, great content that we are going to put in the comments later on. Stay tuned. Many things are happening in Puerto Rico. Remember that last week Steve Case put $100,000 in one of our companies, Avartis Health. Next week we have Demo Day on Friday. It's going to be broadcasted as well. So yeah, you can tell Wanda, please.
Applications start in June
And
for international companies.
Yeah, application for Pilot 18 international cohort is starting in June, so stay tuned. Many things happening. Take care. This was Mentored from San Juan, Puerto Rico. Bye.